questions. So I have slides. I'm going to do some of the first few, and then just kind of wing through some of the others because I want to be able to try and take my time and use most of my time as effectively possible to answer your questions. The three things I want to make sure that we cover today, one of them that Dawn had to make sure I mentioned were some of the issues around healthcare disparities that we see with breast cancer, some of the reasons for that, issues around risk, and then some of the screening and treatment overviews. And then we can dive into whatever you guys are interested in talking about. So I'm a general internist, so I see all kinds of stuff. I have a special interest in women's health. I'm not, by way of disclaimer, an oncologist, but I know enough about the ways that we treat cancer, particularly breast cancer, that I think will generally field some questions. So I am really excited to be here, and I will arm you with my clicker. Get started on our talk just about basically breast cancer within the African American community. I usually start these with the first slide, which just distinguishes more broadly between what's cancer and what's not. Is there any brave volunteer who wants to, yes, I think the mics are on, I see some microphones, who wants to just say for the group what is cancer versus what's not cancer? How do we know something's cancerous versus not? How do they act different? How do those cells act different? What do we mean when we say cancer? I know there's going to be a test. All right. Is everyone here? See, you don't want to look at it, you probably start calling on people. All right, okay, maybe we'll do that. Okay, let's see. Oh, wait. I think it's very confusing. Oh, no, it's not working. It was working 2 seconds ago. All right, that's okay. Wait. So the difference between cancer cells and non-cancer cells. Non-cancer cells start out as normal cells, and they mutate and they change. So it's not that they started out as cancer, they became cancerous. And so the way, and there's a difference between cancer and a tumor. And so cancers are tumors, but there's benign and there's malignant. And so really the difference between, let's say, a fibroid, which is a completely benign tumor, and cancer, breast cancer, ovarian cancer, colon cancer, is the way that those cells act. So I always imagine it to be like people coming to visit. And sometimes you have relatives that come to your house and you like them. They behave. They keep your house clean. They do what they're supposed to. And then sometimes you have those relatives that come and they just run amok. Their kids are right down the wall. They stay 3 weeks later. Cancer's kind of like that, in that it doesn't stay within its confines. It moves to other places it's not supposed to. It takes over things it's not supposed to. It's very aggressive in the way that it acts. And because it's multiplying and dividing so quickly, it allows them to form a solid mass that we can feel, that we can see with our imaging. And then it starts spreading to other body organs. So normal tissues just divide enough to replace T cells, whereas cancer cells, they divide way more than they're supposed to. They take up more space than they're supposed to, and they spread and start taking over other body organs. So the difference between the way that cancer cells behave and non-cancer cells, remember they all started out as part of our family, and then they mutate and change into other things that they're not really helpful for us. There are significant, so when we think about cancer, it's important to know that we always want to know as physicians where those cancer cells started from. So breast cancer acts very different than colon cancer, pancreatic cancer, brain cancer. And all of those can spread to lots of different places in the body. And so a lot of times when I'm seeing patients for the first time, and I say, well, you're getting family history, and say, well, he had cancer in the lymph nodes. He may have had a lymphatic cancer or a lymphoma, but probably it was a cancer that started out someplace and then spread to the lymph nodes. So the first place that the cancer spreads is to the lymph nodes, and then it'll frequently go to the liver, to the bones, or whatever. So it's always important as we're talking about breaking our silence and learning our family history and knowing what the tumor of origin is from. So I'm from Tennessee. Have you heard any of the Southerners here? Alabama. Yeah. So no matter where I am, I'm always a Southern girl. So I live in Chicago now. I've lived in California. I lived in New York and Baltimore. I'm still a Southern girl. And so the same is true for cancer. Where the cancer started from determines how that's going to act for the rest of the cancer's life. So even though I'm in New York City or in Connecticut, I hug everybody the first time I meet them. I'm a Southern girl. Cancer are the same way. So breast cancer, we want to know how it's going to act. The first place that breast cancer is going to spread is to the lymph nodes and the underarm. And that's why we do sentinel node biopsies there. That's why we always want to check the underarms when we're doing a breast exam. And then it spreads other places. And so knowing about cancer and breast cancer is very helpful. But then within breast cancer, there are lots of different types. So who can tell me, if you can volunteer, this is going to be an interactive session, what different kinds of breast cancer there are? There are those people in the room. Yes. Okay. Triple negative. Okay, so who here has heard of triple negative? A few hands there. So we're going to back up because there are lots of different kinds of breast cancers. So it's important to know what organ the cancer started in, but then within that cancer type, it's important to know what are the different kinds. So there are lots of different kinds of lung cancer, a couple of different kinds of breast cancer, and then lots of a couple of different ways for us to think about them. One is where in the breast did it originate? There are a couple of things in the breast. The breasts are milk-producing glands. We may use them for lots of things, but they're there to make milk. And so there are milk glands, which we call globules, and there are milk ducts that carry the milk from the milk gland to the nipple. And so basically, and then there's fat and supportive tissue, connective tissue, but for the most part, they're milk glands, milk ducts. And those are the two basic kinds of breast cancer that you can have. You can have ductal cancer. So who's heard of ductal carcinoma? Okay, that's what it means. It's coming from the milk ducts. Or globular carcinoma. And that just means it's coming from the milk glands or the milk globules. So there's globular cancer, ductal cancer. And with each of those, sometimes we can find the cancers very early, before they even spread out from the milk gland or the milk duct, particularly if it's a ductal cancer, because those show up on x-rays as little bits of calcium. So who has heard of ductal carcinoma in situ, or DCIS? That's what that means, and that it's a cancer from the milk duct that hasn't yet broken out from that milk duct, and we can see little bits of calcium enough on the x-ray enough that we can go in and biopsy and find it before it's even spread. So do you think that cancer spreads and is aggressive? Well, yes. But we found with DCIS a cancer before it has started to even behave like we know it wants to. So you can have globular carcinoma in situ, meaning it hasn't spread out of that milk globule yet. You can have invasive globular carcinoma. You can have ductal carcinoma in situ. It's still within those breast ducts. Or ductal carcinoma that's invasive. And then what we try and do is try and figure out the staging system. So who's heard of the TNN system? Okay, so I see some hands. Does anybody know what those letters stand for? And at any point, if I say anything that sounds confusing, just raise your hand. I do a lot of health education, particularly on diabetes, and so I always feel like we're on the same train moving forward, just like stop the train. And if you have a question, probably 20 other people have the same question. So T stands for tumor size, so we want to know how big it is. N stands for nodes, has it spread to a lymph node, and M stands for metastases. Has it gone from the breast to someplace else in the body? Is it in the liver? Is it in the bones? Is it in the lungs? And so that staging system helps us figure out how far that cancer has spread, which will in part determine how we're going to treat that cancer. So if you're someone, and in general, the bigger the tumor, the longer it's been there, the longer of a chance it's had to spread to some other place. And that's not always the case. Sometimes we have tumors that are super aggressive, and before they get bigger than just something, they've already launched off and metastasized. That's more uncommon. Usually you'll have a bigger, bulkier tumor that's gone to the lymph nodes and then has gone to other parts of the body. So the TNN staging system helps us figure out how far you are along in that staging process. Because if you have ductal carcinoma in situ, for example, so you have a milk duct cancer that hasn't even spread outside of that duct, you don't need chemotherapy. Isn't that nice? So helping us figure out what kind of cancer it is and how far it spread, hopefully not at all, means that your treatment can differ. So you can have better treatment, which means you're less likely to have side effects from the treatment, and you have better outcomes, means you're less likely to be they have what we call morbidity and mortality. Morbidity just means sickness and illness, and mortality means death. Right with that. So the earlier we find cancer, particularly breast cancer, the better chance we have of having really good outcomes. Even if that outcome means that you don't have to suffer through some of the treatments that aren't so great. Any questions so far?